Well, right now at noon, a major blow from the feds as wildfires continue to surge across the state. Why the Trump administration says they're denying some federal grants. Plus,
I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color tie are you wearing?
okay, tense moments on Capitol Hill as Dr. Anthony Fauci refuses to answer certain questions related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And
there are families grieving who have lived through a total nightmare. They deserve justice.
New details today being released about the weapons used in the deadly Seattle Center shooting. What we know as one suspect remains on the run. A last-ditch effort to save the Lloyd Center ice rink has officially fallen short. This morning, Portland City Council rejected appeals to the center's master plan. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Blair Best. It's important to note here that today's hearing was not about whether the Lloyd Center will be redeveloped. That decision had already been made. Instead, Council considered whether the city followed the proper process when approving the master plan. City Council voted to deny both appeals this morning, upholding the Design Commission's approval of the master plan. The mall is set to close on August 8th. And Governor Tina Kotek is ordering flags to be lowered to half-staff to honor an Oregon sailor who was killed in a helicopter crash. U.S. Navy Commander Gabriel Edwards died earlier this month after an emergency helicopter landing in the Arabian Sea. Edwards was an Oakland native, his wife sharing in part, quote, "We find comfort in knowing that Gabe lived a life of extraordinary purpose, devoted to his country, his squadron, and above all, the family he loved so completely." Edwards was 42 years old. Well, so far this fire season, well over 1.5 million acres have burned in Oregon, and evacuations are in place for one of the state's largest wildfires burning in both Oregon and Idaho. The Bureau of Land Management says the Big Grass Fire has burned just shy of 300,000 acres in Malheur and Owyhee counties. Crews say the fire is threatening over 300 structures and is only 7% contained. And just north of Sisters, a lot of progress has been made on the Akawa Butte fire. This one has burned over 27,000 acres. And even more of the evacuation orders have been downgraded, with containment at 10%. Officials are thanking around 1,600 crew members who have worked in this firefight and sharing a moment from a grateful neighbor that stood out to them.
He says, "I want you to know that you're giving us hope." That's cool. That's powerful, that we are here to give you hope. That's an awesome responsibility.
That's what it's all about, right? Much of the crew is now headed north to help fight the bench fire. And as Oregon deals with what will likely be a record-breaking year for fires, the state was dealt another financial blow. Federal grants meant to help with two of the largest fires were just denied by the Trump administration. Now, this comes after Governor Tina Kotek announced the federal government had signed off on FEMA funding for the Akawa Butte fire, but the feds denied assistance for the East Evans Creek and the Roe Creek complex. Those two fires combined have cost more than $70 million to fight.
It's hard to tell what the number should be until we understand how the federal government's going to be joining us to cover the cost.
In a letter to FEMA officials, Oregon Senators Merkley and Wyden are questioning that, calling the decision to deny a, quote, "a significant departure from FEMA's historical criteria and agency guidance." They say both wildfires meet the threshold for aid. And with all these fires in mind, let's kick things over to meteorologist Chris McGinnis, who's tracking air quality across eastern and central Washington. Hey, Chris.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Blair, check this out. So this is a pretty compelling photo from ODOT. This is Highway 26 east of Prineville, as firefighters were working to keep that fire kind of off the road here, again, in Crook County, between Crook and Wheeler counties. Sharing this because the road has been intermittently closed. What ODOT is actually doing today and during daylight hours today and probably tomorrow too is sending pilot cars through during the daylight hours to get traffic between Prineville and Mitchell, but then the road recloses overnight. To Blair's point, yes, the air quality is not good east of the Cascades from Baker City down to Burns, and then Hood River, Wasco, Jefferson, Crook counties, again, those continue to be areas under air quality alerts today. And I think if you look closely here, you can plainly see some of the individual smoke plumes here. There's one up in Union County. We've got, of course, the large area of wildfire smoke in portions of Crook County today. And here in the Willamette Valley, we had some brief morning clouds, but those are peeling away. At the beach, it's actually quite lovely today. This is the live look from Lincoln City. Currently 68 degrees there. The Reserve Golf Course and Vineyard out in the lowest, showing plenty of sun and 72 at lunchtime. And here in Portland, we're on our way to highs in the low 80s today with full sunshine. So another picture perfect afternoon. We'll keep the temperatures pretty comfortable again tomorrow. I've got two maybe hot days in our forecast, but also kind of a cool weekend for the first weekend of August. We'll take a look at that coming up in just a few minutes.
Okay, Chris, we'll see you soon. Well, here's a look at some national headlines this afternoon. The Federal Reserve has decided to hold interest rates steady today. It is the fifth straight meeting that the central bank decided to keep the benchmark lending rate unchanged. It'll stay at 3.5%. However, it was not a unanimous vote to hold the line. 3 members of the Fed wanted a quarter-point hike. It's been 3 years since the last time the central bank raised its key interest rate. And Dr. Anthony Fauci's testimony before the Senate is turning heads this afternoon. His appearance by subpoena came before Republican Senator Rand Paul and the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Now, Paul has long argued that Fauci should shoulder the blame for the COVID pandemic and the nation's response. Fauci repeatedly invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination under questioning from lawmakers. Take a listen.
What color is the carpet in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Let's just get one thing straight. You don't have any rights under the Fifth Amendment because you've been pardoned, as you very well know. As the Supreme Court has been...
The now retired 85-year-old Fauci was head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases during the pandemic. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the U.S. shouldn't ban Chinese artificial intelligence models, saying he doesn't think that's a good approach to the AI race. Instead, Zuckerberg suggests U.S. companies should focus on identifying bottlenecks and roadblocks to better compete. His comments come as the U.S. government debates how to regulate the technology and respond to competition from China. Well, fighting continued overnight between the U.S. and Iran. Meantime, President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for their first in-person meeting since the two leaders began the war in Iran. NBC's Alice Barr has all the details from Washington.
Fresh fighting overnight in the Middle East, shattering a days-long pause in strikes. U.S. Central Command now saying it successfully knocked down a wave of Iranian missiles launched in an attempted surprise attack on American forces based in the Middle East. CENTCOM also saying the U.S. military joined with Saudi Arabia to strike Iran-aligned terrorists in Iraq that they say targeted U.S. forces and Saudi energy infrastructure with drones. It all comes just as President Trump had voiced optimism about progress in diplomatic talks, while again threatening more destruction if Iran doesn't agree to a long-term deal.
I could take out most of their bridges in less than an hour. All of their power plants would be gone.
Earlier Tuesday, the president met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who downplayed any friction over the allies' goals for the Iran war.
We have a common commitment. We don't want to see this fanatic regime in Tehran have nuclear weapons.
Also at the White House, President Trump separately hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who then met with senators on Capitol Hill in his push for more American missile defense systems.
I shared what we need, our needs. I shared it with the president.
Both world leaders came to Washington for the funeral services for the late Senator Lindsey Graham.
He was a force of nature, and I will miss him greatly.
And Tuesday night, the Senate voted to advance a sweeping Russia sanctions bill that Senator Graham had been pressing for and that now bears his name. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.